Cradle of Horror presents The Passenger. Lewis was having a bad morning. He didn't want to go anywhere, let alone to work, on a beautiful and very early Saturday morning. And although he was frustrated waiting for the bus to arrive, Lewis was relieved to find a seat. As he walked down the aisle, he tried to ignore the teenagers who were playing music on their phones without headphones, the old man who was eating smelly food, and the woman who decided that the seat next to her should be for her bag, rather than an actual person. He ignored it all and found an empty seat at the back with the rest of the people who were just trying to mind their own business and get to their destination. Or at least, that's what he thought. He slumped himself down in his seat and checked his phone to see if there were any messages from Betty. No messages. So he put on some music and closed his eyes. The world was blocked out, and the music began to swell in his ears. This isn't so bad, he thought. But he thought that too soon. Minutes after the world disappeared, Lewis felt a heavy hand land on his shoulder. He opened his eyes, shaken back to reality. A man with a beard full of what appeared to be mustard and almonds was looking directly into his eyes. Lewis jumped in his seat. The passenger opened his mouth and said, "Are you listening to me, son?" Lewis didn't know what to say, but he somehow managed to nod his head. "Good," replied the passenger. "I need you to hear me." Lewis nodded again. "Today is going to be the best and worst day of your life." Lewis, obviously confused, looked around at the other passengers, none of whom seemed to notice what was happening. Lewis tried to make eye contact with some of them, but it didn't work. "You gotta look at me, son," the passenger told Lewis when he noticed that Lewis was looking around. Again, Lewis nodded. "Okay," he continued. "You gotta know that cotton is illegal. The sky is purple, and you're going to be too late. But there's one more thing, and it's the most important." Lewis felt the bus slow down, so he decided he would jump off before the passenger finished. He leapt out the door and stood on the side of the road trying to catch his breath as he watched the passenger stare at him from the bus window. When the bus was far enough away that Lewis could barely see it, he finally felt relieved. That is, he was relieved until he realized he got off at the wrong stop and would be late for work. Lewis shook his head and laughed to himself. Lucky guess, he thought. Lewis had to jog a little bit, but he managed to get to work only a few minutes late. That's not too late, Lewis thought to himself. Lewis was the manager at a clothing store. He didn't like his job at all, but he'd worked there since he was a teenager, working himself up to his current position. Everybody liked him there. He was comfortable, but pretty professionally unfulfilled. He was especially frustrated that Betty wouldn't answer him. They'd been having problems and were at a crossroads in their relationship, but Lewis was certain they could work through it. Betty, however, wasn't so sure. But Lewis loved Betty. She was funny, smart, and he loved how old-fashioned her name was. Lewis finally arrived at his desk. He apologized to his coworkers for being late and dropped in his seat in the back office. He logged on to his computer and immediately heard his phone ring. He grabbed it and saw the word "Mom" on the caller ID. He let it ring. He'd call her back later. His mother was a very kind, very well-meaning woman. But since Lewis's father died, she'd been pretty lonely. Lewis, being an only child, did everything he could to make her comfortable, but she was still adjusting to her new reality. Lewis encouraged his mother to go to community events to make friends, but she never did. Lewis started making his rounds when he heard a ruckus in the fitting room. He stopped in and saw two co-workers arguing. Lewis stepped in to mediate. The employees were painting the fitting rooms. They were painting the walls red and the ceiling blue. Those were the official store colors. But after finishing the red on the walls, someone accidentally spilt the blue paint into the red paint. One employee argued that they couldn't leave the ceilings unpainted because they looked unfinished, and the other argued that they should just buy more paint. But even Lewis agreed it wasn't worth it to buy more. Lewis figured the paint still looked kind of blue and would probably be fine for the ceiling. "It's purple," stated one of the employees very angrily. "That's fine. It's still a bluish purple." The employee was frustrated, but Lewis said, "Hey, it'll be cool. The sky will be purple." Lewis stopped suddenly as he walked away. The sky is purple. Could it be another coincidence? He was late for work, and now the purple sky. Lewis shook his head and tried to forget it. His mother called again, so he decided to answer it to distract him from thinking of the passenger on the bus. His mother told him a story about being at the doctor's office and not realizing that she was being called in. "I was listening for someone to say Tris, but they didn't say that, so I missed my appointment." Lewis tried to explain that Tris was a nickname, a shortened version of her full name, but his mother didn't want to hear anything about it. She started telling Lewis about how his father used to use the first part of her name as a nickname, and she always liked that more. Lewis tried to tell her everything would be okay, and then quickly said goodbye. Lewis returned to his desk to prepare for the upcoming shipment when he heard more commotion on the floor. Right as Lewis left to deal with the issue, he heard his phone ring again. It was his mom, so he let it ring as he left his office. Lewis walked up to the register, where a woman was yelling at the employee about how the sweater gave her a rash. Lewis stepped in. He tried to give her a discount on future purchases, but that didn't work. He tried to assure her that the sweater was from their new collection, but she didn't care. Lewis asked if she was allergic to any fabric. She said no. He asked if she was sure. She said, "I think I'd know if I was allergic to cotton." Lewis tried not to grimace or roll his eyes. It wasn't the first time that a disgruntled customer came in wreaking havoc. But then she said something that triggered Lewis. This should be illegal. Lewis looked at her. He tried to push her to say what she meant, but she just walked away. Illegal? Cotton is illegal? Could that be what she meant? Was everything the passenger said coming true? As Lewis walked away from the register, he overheard another customer coming in, saying that he had a rash from the cotton sweater he purchased as well. Everything the passenger said came true. But wait, he said there was one more thing. But Lewis ran off the bus before he could finish. He said it was the most important thing. Lewis tried to keep working without worrying about it, but his curiosity and concern overtook him. He had to know what it was. He told his team that he would be taking an extended lunch break and ran out the door. He got on the same bus that he took that morning hoping to see the passenger. He rode for 30 minutes, which turned into an hour, which turned into several hours. He rode the bus route several times when he finally decided that he would go back to work. Just at that moment, the passenger entered the bus. Lewis ran over to him. He asked the passenger several times what the most important thing was. The passenger was confused. He didn't seem to understand who Lewis was. Lewis tried to remind him, but it didn't seem to make any difference. Lewis couldn't believe that he'd gone this far. He'd convinced himself that this man knew something, or that these things that happened were more than just a coincidence. His stop came around, so he decided to get off. Right as the doors opened, the passenger said, "Bet is done." Lewis's ears perked up. He looked back and said, "What did you say?" The passenger repeated, "Bet is done." Lewis got off the bus and mulled over the words in his head. Bet is done. Bet is done. Finally, he realized Betty is done. His girlfriend, Betty, was over the relationship. Just then, his mother rang his phone again. He put his phone on silent and decided that he had to do something big, something to get Betty back. He got back to work, and at that point there was a huge line at the register of people returning clothes. All the employees were frantic and trying to process everything. So they asked Lewis a million questions. He couldn't deal with it, since he knew he was about to lose Betty for good. He told his employees to just give everyone a refund, and he kept walking. He walked by the fitting rooms and saw the purple ceiling all painted. His heart was beating out of his chest. He was going to lose Betty. He grabbed his things, ran out of the store, and took a cab. He stopped by a florist, bought a huge bouquet and chocolates, and hopped back in the cab to go straight to Betty's place. When he arrived, he rang the buzzer. No answer. He rang again. No answer. He started to panic. Maybe Betty was hurt or sick. Maybe that's what he meant by bet's done. She's sick or in trouble, not done with the relationship. Someone from the building opened the door, and Lewis slid in behind them. He ran up to her apartment, knocked on her door, waited, knocked again, and waited. Finally, Betty opened the door. Lewis told her he wanted to fix things. He wanted to win her back, and he would do anything. She uttered the words that Lewis didn't want to hear. "I'm done," she said. Lewis was heartbroken. He didn't try to fight it though. He didn't see the point. She wasn't going to change her mind. Lewis walked away, defeated. He had nowhere to go, so he went back to the office. When he walked in, he saw the store was closed. His bosses, who usually only worked from the corporate office, were there. They seemed relieved and angry when they spotted Lewis. They told Lewis about the customers demanding refunds. Lewis said that he knew about it. That made them angrier, as they didn't understand why he would leave in the middle of a crisis. It turns out that all the new clothes from the shipment that day had the same problem, and Lewis didn't do anything about it. He didn't fight back because he knew he was wrong. He tried to explain that he was dealing with a personal issue, but they didn't care, and ultimately, neither did Lewis. He put all his personal items in a box and left. That was the end of his 17-year career. As he sat on the bus, he realized he hadn't checked his phone in hours since he put it on silent. He pulled it out of his pocket and saw 20 missed calls from his mother and some voice messages. While his mother was persistent, 20 calls is a lot, even for her. He listened to the first voice message. It was the hospital. Louis jumped off the bus and took a cab to the hospital. When he got there, she was gone. The doctors explained that she was eating at a restaurant and just seemed to fall asleep when she passed away. She wasn't in any pain. It was just her time to go. She was just done. Louis was inconsolable. He was so concerned about everything else that happened that day that he ignored the most important person in his life, and he was too late for her. Louis looked at the chart. He kept questioning how the passenger could be right about everything else and miss this. He looked up at the top of his mom's form, and then it hit him. He made the same mistake his mother made that morning. Her full name stared back at him in big block letters. Beatrice. Bet's done. Bet was the nickname Louis's dad used for her, the first part of her name. That was the nickname she preferred. Louis left the hospital on the bus again, and he saw the passenger immediately as he got on. Louis told the passenger that everything came true, but that it wasn't the best day of his life. It was only the worst. The man asked why it was so bad. Louis replied that he lost his job. The man asked if he liked his job. Louis said no. Then Louis said that his girlfriend ended their relationship. The man asked if that relationship was something worth saving. Being honest with himself, Louis realized it wasn't. But then Louis said that his mother died. The man said, "At least Louis now knows what's most important in life." Louis couldn't argue with that.